The phone rang just as I was looking at flight prices for Maui. I had the page open, ready to click book now. 2 years of saving, working extra shifts, and skipping weekends out with friends had led to this moment. Lydia and I had talked about this trip since the day we moved in together. It was supposed to be our big escape: sun, ocean, peace. I smiled when I saw her name flash on the screen. But when I answered, her voice didn't sound like Lydia. It was shaky, low, like she'd been crying. "Hey," I said. "You okay?" There was a long pause, just her breathing. Then she said, "I can't go." I frowned. "What do you mean you can't go?" "The trip." "I'm using the money," she whispered. My stomach tightened. "What money?" "Our vacation fund." I laughed a little, waiting for her to say it was a joke. But she didn't. Instead, I heard her sniff. "It's for Evan." It felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. Evan. Her ex-boyfriend. The same guy who cheated on her, borrowed money, and left her stranded 2 years before she met me. I didn't even know what to say. "What about him?" I finally asked. "He's in jail," she said quietly. "He needs help, Anne. I can't just leave him there." I stared at the wall, my chest burning. "So you're bailing him out? With our money?" She didn't answer right away. "I'm sorry. I have to do this." Her words hit harder than anything she could have shouted. I thought about all the nights she cried about Evan. The way she told me she'd never forgive him. How she said I was the first man she ever felt safe with. All of it suddenly felt hollow. "All right," I said, my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. "Do what you have to do." She started to say something, maybe to explain, maybe to make it sound better, but I hung up before she could. I sat there for a while, staring at the open laptop screen. The Book Now button was still glowing blue. That was the moment everything inside me went quiet. Not angry quiet, just empty. I wasn't going to beg her to choose me. I wasn't going to argue about loyalty or logic. If she wanted to use our hard-earned money to save a man who had already destroyed her once, then that was her choice. But I had mine too. I closed the laptop and sat back, breathing slow. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but one thing was certain. This wasn't ending with tears or apologies. I'd spent years saving for that trip. Maybe it was time I took one anyway, just not with Lydia. And as strange as it sounds, in that moment, I already knew, whatever I did next wasn't going to be about getting even. It was going to be about making sure she never had the chance to betray me again. I met Lydia on a rainy afternoon in Portland. I had stopped at a small cafe near my shop, just trying to warm up with a cup of coffee. She was sitting by the window, reading something on her tablet, her hair tied up messily but somehow perfect. When she looked up and smiled at me, I remember thinking that smile could fix a bad day. We started talking, and by the time I left, I had her number written on a napkin. Our first date was simple: burgers and a walk near the river. She told me about her job at the dental clinic and how she wanted to travel the world one day. I told her about cars, about how I'd been fixing engines since high school. She laughed at my jokes, even the bad ones, and from then on, we just fit. A year later, we moved into a small apartment on the east side of the city. It wasn't fancy. The paint was chipped in places, and the heater rattled in winter. But it felt like home. We made plans, big and small. We wanted to see new places, try new things, live a little bigger than our paychecks allowed. That's when we started the adventure fund. It began as a mason jar on the kitchen counter. Every time one of us had spare cash, we'd toss it in and write the amount on a sticky note. Eventually, we opened a joint savings account and labeled it Adventure Fund. Lydia said it made her feel like we were building something real, something that belonged to both of us. I liked the sound of that. I picked up extra shifts at the garage, sometimes coming home long after midnight, hands stained with oil. Lydia would leave food for me on the stove, always with a note: "Almost there, babe. Hawaii, here we come." It made the long days easier. She worked hard too, cleaning teeth all day and still finding the energy to laugh when I got home. On Friday nights, we'd open a bottle of cheap wine and talk about everything we'd do once we finally hit our goal. She wanted to snorkel and see sea turtles. I wanted to hike up a volcano and watch the sunrise. We planned it down to the smallest details: which island we'd stay on, which beaches were best, what kind of food we'd try. Those talks felt like our future, something solid and sure. There were times when I caught her staring off, lost in thought, but I didn't think much of it. I figured everyone had moments like that. She'd always shake it off with a smile and change the subject. Life felt steady, simple, and good. I really believed we were a team, two people working toward the same dream. I didn't know it then, but cracks had already started forming. They were small, hidden behind smiles and promises, but they were there. I just couldn't see them yet. It started small, almost too small to notice. We were sitting on the couch one night, watching a movie, when Lydia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and put it face down. I didn't think much of it. But later, she sighed and said quietly, "Evan's in trouble again." The name barely registered at first. I knew Evan was her ex, but that was all I really knew, a guy she said she wanted nothing to do with anymore. I just nodded, figuring she was mentioning it out of pity. Everyone has people from their past they'd rather forget. A few days later, though, I noticed little changes. Lydia started keeping her phone on silent. She'd step outside to take calls, sometimes late at night. When I'd ask who it was, she'd smile a little too quickly and say, "Just a friend from back home. He's going through a rough patch." I wanted to believe her. I really did. Lydia had always been caring, maybe too caring sometimes. I told myself she just felt bad for someone. But that uneasy feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. One night, I woke up around midnight and found her standing in the hallway, whispering into her phone. I could only make out bits and pieces. Her voice was low, shaky. I know. I'll see what I can do," she said. "No, I haven't told him." My chest tightened. Who hadn't she told me about? When she noticed me standing there, she jumped like I'd caught her doing something wrong. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. She nodded too fast. "Yeah, just talking to someone who needed advice." "Go back to bed, babe." I wanted to ask questions, but I didn't. I just nodded and went back to the bedroom, pretending not to care. But I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to her whisper on the phone again from the kitchen. A few nights later, I came home early from work. The apartment was quiet except for her voice coming from the living room. She didn't know I was there. I stopped by the doorway, out of sight, and listened. "I can't just let him rot in there," she said, her voice cracking. Those words hit me like a punch. Rot in there. It didn't take much to figure out what she meant. Someone was in jail, and it sure wasn't just a friend. I stepped back quietly, my hands shaking. I didn't need to hear more. In that single moment, every small lie, every late call, every excuse clicked into place. It was him. Evan. The man she swore she was done with. I went into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I felt sick. I wasn't angry yet, just cold inside, like everything I thought we'd built was suddenly fragile, fake. I didn't confront her that night. I wanted to, but I couldn't bring myself to hear her say his name out loud. Not yet. I just waited, hoping I was wrong, even though, deep down, I already knew I wasn't. When Lydia finally told me the truth about the money, it was late in the evening. I was sitting at the kitchen table, eating leftovers from the night before. She came in, her face pale, hands trembling slightly as she held her phone. I could tell something was wrong before she even spoke. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. I put my fork down and waited. She took a deep breath. "I used the money. The vacation fund." I felt my stomach drop. "Used it for what?" I asked, though I already knew. "For Evan," she said, her voice breaking a little. "He got arrested. I paid the bail." For a few seconds, I couldn't say anything. I just stared at her, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Then the words came out slowly. "Why him, Lydia? Why now?" She looked down, twisting her hands. "Because he has no one else. He doesn't have family, and his friends won't help him. I can't turn my back on someone I once loved." The words cut deep. Once loved. The way she said it made it sound like that love never really left. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of it all settle on me. "You're choosing the past over the future," I said quietly. "Over us." Her eyes filled with tears. "It's not like that. It's just money. We can save again." I shook my head. She didn't understand. It wasn't about the dollars in the account. It was about everything that money stood for: trust, teamwork, commitment. We built that fund together. Every time we added a few dollars, it felt like another step forward in our life together. And now it was gone, handed over to the man who had already broken her once. "You don't see what this means," I said. "You didn't even ask me. You just decided." She tried to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't yell. There was no point. The anger inside me wasn't loud. It was quiet and sharp, like a knife slowly twisting. I looked at her, really looked, and realized something had changed. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the same person who dreamed about Maui sunsets and new beginnings. Somewhere along the line, she had turned back toward her past, and I was left standing in it. That night, after she went to bed, I walked through the apartment in silence. Every photo, every memory, felt heavy. I opened the closet and started packing. Not everything, just enough to fit in my truck. My clothes, some tools, a few things that were mine alone. I didn't slam doors or leave a note. I just packed quietly, one piece at a time. The whole time, my mind was clear. There was no shouting, no tears, only a simple truth repeating in my head. It's not about money. It's about loyalty. By the time the sun started to rise, half my things were gone, and so was any part of me that still believed we were unshakable. I didn't say a word to Lydia the next morning. She was already gone when I woke up, her side of the bed cold. The apartment felt heavier than usual, like all the air had been drained out of it. I sat at the edge of the bed for a while, staring at the floor, trying to decide what to do next. I didn't want another fight. Words wouldn't fix what she had done. Instead, I went straight to my laptop and opened our joint account. The number on the screen hit me like a brick, $8,000 gone overnight. She hadn't lied. She really did it. There was still $2,000 left, but it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what that empty space in the account meant. It was proof that she had made her choice. When I went to the kitchen, I saw a small note stuck to the fridge. Her handwriting was shaky. Please don't hate me. I'll make it right. I read it twice, then set it down on the counter. I didn't feel anger, not the way I expected to. What I felt was calm, the kind that comes when you finally see the truth for what it is. I smiled, not because I forgave her, but because I finally understood. Lydia wasn't the person I thought she was, and maybe she never had been. For the first time in a long time, everything was clear. I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and drove to the bank. The teller smiled politely as I asked to close the account. I withdrew the last $2,000 in cash, put it in an envelope, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Watching the account close on the computer screen felt final, like shutting the door on something that had already burned down. Back home, I packed the rest of my things. I didn't rush. I folded my clothes neatly, took my tools, and left anything that was ours instead of mine. The photos, the furniture, the souvenirs from small road trips, I left them all. I didn't want reminders of what used to feel good. Once my bags were packed, I took one last look around the apartment. The sunlight was coming in through the blinds, cutting lines across the floor. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel like my home anymore. I grabbed my keys, walked out, and didn't lock the door behind me. The drive out of Portland was quiet. No music, no thoughts I wanted to hear. Just the sound of the road and the hum of the truck engine. I kept driving until the city lights faded in the rearview mirror. My brother had a cabin out in Montana, far enough away from everything and everyone. That's where I was headed. By the time I crossed into the state line, I realized what I was really doing. Lydia was busy trying to bail her ex out of jail, but I was bailing myself out too, out of a relationship that had been drowning for months. And for the first time in a long while, I finally felt free. A week passed before I heard anything from Lydia. I had settled into my brother's cabin by then, a quiet place surrounded by tall pines, the kind of silence that makes you think about everything you've been avoiding. The phone barely had a signal out there, but when it finally buzzed, I saw her name light up the screen. At first, I ignored it. Then came another call. And another. By the 10th one, I turned the phone over and let it ring. Eventually, the calls stopped and a voicemail notification popped up. I didn't plan to listen, but something made me press play. Her voice came through, shaky and desperate. "Evan took the money," she said between sobs. "He promised he'd pay me back, but he's gone. I can't find him. I'm so sorry. Please come home." I sat there for a long time, the message replaying in my head. There it was, the full circle. The same man she betrayed me for had done the same thing to her. It should have made me angry, but it didn't. I didn't feel pity either. All I felt was a strange, quiet sense of confirmation. She'd traded everything for a ghost, and now she was paying the price. I didn't call her back. I didn't text. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the home camera system. The cameras were still connected, one in the living room, one by the front door. It felt wrong, maybe even petty, but I wanted to see what she looked like now, what the aftermath of her choices had turned her into. The feed came up, and there she was, pacing back and forth in the living room. Her hair was messy, her eyes red. Every few minutes, she'd pick up her phone, check it, then toss it down again. I turned the volume up just a little. "Please, just answer me," she said out loud, her voice cracking. "You're being selfish." That word, selfish, hit me harder than I expected. She still didn't get it. To her, I was the selfish one for walking away, not her for giving away our future to her past. Watching her, I realized there was nothing left to fix. Whatever love I had for her had already faded into something empty. She dropped to the couch, covering her face with her hands, crying so hard her shoulders shook. For a second, I almost felt something, sympathy, maybe, but it passed as quickly as it came. I closed the laptop slowly and leaned back in my chair. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. For the first time, I felt calm, clear in a way I hadn't been in months. I knew right then what kind of revenge I wanted. Not shouting, not payback, not making her hurt. I wanted peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop trying to fix someone who was never willing to fix themselves. That was the moment I decided I wouldn't go back, not ever. Lydia had made her choice. And now, I was making mine. A week later, I drove back into town. The roads felt familiar, but I didn't feel the same. I wasn't coming back for her, not to fix things, not to make peace, but to end things properly. I parked a few blocks from the apartment and sat there for a while, watching people go about their normal lives. Then I finally got out and walked up the old staircase that creaked like always. When I knocked, Lydia opened the door, and the look on her face said everything. Her eyes were swollen, her hair a mess, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, like all the fight had drained out of her. "You came back," she whispered, like she didn't believe it. I nodded. "Just to talk." She stepped aside and let me in. The apartment was a mess, empty takeout boxes, clothes thrown over the couch, and an open bottle of wine on the counter. It didn't look like the home we had built together. It looked like the leftovers of something broken. We sat down at the table. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then she started talking, her words spilling out fast, one after another. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she said. "Evan told me he just needed a few days to get the money together. He said he'd pay me back, but then he stopped answering. I was stupid. I wanted to believe he'd changed. I thought helping him would make things right somehow." I didn't interrupt her. I just sat there, listening. She kept talking about how guilty she felt, how she hadn't eaten, how she hadn't slept, how she missed me. She tried to reach for my hand once, but I pulled back just slightly, enough for her to notice. When she finally stopped, her eyes were full of tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I made a mistake." I took a slow breath and looked at her. "I understand," I said quietly. "You thought you were doing the right thing. Maybe you were trying to help someone who didn't deserve it. But I get it." Her face softened, like she thought I was forgiving her. She nodded and tried to smile a little. "So, what now?" she asked. "I need some time," I said, "to rethink things, to figure out what I want." She agreed right away, almost too quickly. "Take all the time you need," she said. "I'll wait." I nodded again and stood up. "I'll be in touch," I told her. Then I walked out. What she didn't know was that I had no plans of coming back. While she sat there hoping I'd change my mind, I was already setting things in motion. I wanted her to understand what she'd thrown away, not through anger or shouting, but by showing her exactly what life looked like without me in it. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure, the kind that leaves nothing behind but silence. A few days after seeing Lydia, I started looking for a place of my own. I wasn't ready to leave the area completely, but I knew I couldn't live under the same roof with her anymore. When I checked the listings, I noticed something almost strange. A small one-bedroom apartment was open for rent in the same complex, just across the courtyard. It felt like a sign. Close enough to finish things quietly, far enough to finally have my own space. I called the landlord the next morning and arranged to see it. The place was simple, a little smaller than what we had, but clean and private. I signed the lease on the spot, making sure everything was under my name only. No shared accounts, no shared bills, no chance for her to touch anything that was mine again. I didn't tell Lydia about the new place. She thought I was staying with my brother still, thinking things over. That gave me the time I needed. Each day, while she was at work, I went back to the old apartment and moved a few things out. I didn't rush. I wanted it to be quiet, careful, invisible. The first day, I took my tools and clothes. The second, my personal stuff, old photos, books, and the few things that really meant something to me. By the end of the week, my side of the closet was empty, and the drawers were half full of nothing but air. Lydia didn't notice. She hardly spent time there anymore. I left behind everything she had bought using my money: the couch, the TV, the kitchen set. It wasn't worth the argument, and honestly, I didn't want reminders of us. Let her keep it all. That way, she'd have to look at those things every day and remember what she lost. Once everything was in the new apartment, I went back one last time. The air inside felt stale, almost lifeless. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, the same spot where we once stood laughing about how close we were to our Hawaii trip. It felt like another lifetime. I pulled out a folded piece of paper and placed it on the kitchen table. On it, I wrote just one line: "You bailed out a criminal, but let the wrong man go free." The words looked harsh on paper, but they were true. I wanted her to see it, to feel it, not out of cruelty, but out of honesty. Next to the note, I set down a printed copy of the Maui itinerary. One flight, one reservation, one name, mine. I had booked the trip earlier that day. Same destination, same dates, just without her. I stood there for a moment, taking one last look at what used to be our home. Then I walked out quietly, locked the door behind me, and slid the key under it. This time, I didn't look back. The plane touched down in Maui just as the sun began to rise over the water. The light spread across the ocean like gold, and for a moment, I just sat there, staring out the window, breathing it in. I didn't think about Lydia or what she might be doing. I didn't even feel bitter anymore. It was just quiet inside me, the kind of quiet I hadn't felt in a long time. When I stepped out of the airport, the warm air hit me. It smelled like salt and flowers, nothing like the grey streets of Portland. I rented a small car and drove toward the coast, windows down, the wind rushing through. Every mile felt like a piece of my old life falling away. At the hotel, the clerk smiled and handed me a room key. "One guest?" she asked. I nodded. Saying it out loud might have stung once, but not anymore. One guest. One new start. The first morning, I walked down to the beach barefoot. The sand was cool under my feet, the waves calm and steady. I stood there for a long time, just listening to the water. I realized how long it had been since I'd done something for myself. Not for Lydia, not for us, but just for me. Every overtime shift, every extra dollar, every small sacrifice had been for a future I thought we shared. But standing there, I could finally admit that it was never really ours. It was mine all along, and I'd just let her take part in it. Later that afternoon, I took one of the excursions we had once planned, a hike up a ridge overlooking the island. The path was steep, but every step made me feel lighter. When I reached the top, the view stretched for miles: blue water, green cliffs, and a sky so wide it made everything else seem small. That's when it hit me. Revenge wasn't about payback or making her feel the way she made me feel. It was about taking back what she had stolen: my peace, my energy, my sense of self. That night, I went to a small bar by the shore. I ordered a drink, something cold and strong, and sat at a table facing the ocean. People around me were laughing, dancing, living. I felt no need to join them. It was enough to sit there, knowing I was free from everything that had held me back. As the sun dipped into the horizon, I raised my glass. "Here's to Evan," I whispered, half smiling. The best mistake she ever made. The waves rolled in, the air smelled like salt and warmth, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from finally letting go. Months passed after the trip, and life slowly found its rhythm again. Hawaii had given me something I didn't know I needed: distance, not just from Lydia, but from the person I had been with her. When I got back to the mainland, I didn't return to Portland. Instead, I drove straight to Montana, back to my brother's cabin. The mountains felt honest, steady, and quiet. It was the kind of quiet that helped me rebuild from the inside out. I sold my truck soon after and used the money to open a small garage on the edge of town. It wasn't much at first, just me, a few tools, and a rusty sign. But word spread fast, and soon enough, I had regulars coming in, people who appreciated honest work and fair prices. I worked with my hands again, the way I used to before life got complicated. Each engine I fixed, each car that rolled out of my shop, felt like a piece of my life being put back together. Then one morning, while checking emails, I saw her name. Lydia. For a moment, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to delete it without opening it, but curiosity won. The message was short. She said Evan had been arrested again, something about theft and fraud. She mentioned losing her job because of all the debt she'd taken on trying to fix things. The last line read, "I hope you're doing okay." I didn't feel anger or satisfaction, just a kind of quiet understanding. She was living the result of her choices, just as I was living mine. I typed a short reply, "I'm doing well. I hope you find peace too." Then I hit send and never heard from her again. Life kept moving forward. The business grew, and with it, so did I. I met someone new, a woman named Claire. She was kind in a way that didn't demand anything in return. Steady, patient, and honest. She didn't talk about forever, and maybe that's what made it feel real. She reminded me that love doesn't have to be loud or dramatic to be true. It just has to be consistent. Sometimes, late at night, when the shop was quiet and the air smelled faintly of oil and pine, I'd think about Lydia. Not because I missed her, but because she was the turning point. She taught me what betrayal feels like, and what self-respect truly costs. People often say betrayal breaks you. Maybe it does for a while, but I've learned that it can also shape you. It strips away everything fake, everything weak, until all that's left is the part of you that refuses to stay broken. I didn't just walk away from Lydia. I walked back to myself. And that, more than anything, was the real freedom I had been searching for all along.